Ever been stuck pondering a true clash of titans? You know, a what-if scenario that just kind of gnaws at you?
Happens all the time.
Right. So today, we're plunging headfirst into one of those really fascinating hypotheticals. Christian Wolff, the accountant who's, well, a lethal weapon, versus John Wick, the boogeyman assassin sphere.
Ah, yes.
You, our listener, sent in your thoughts, and even this really detailed Wolff versus Wick combat analysis.pdf. And our mission is basically to dissect what makes these two so compelling and what might happen if their very different worlds actually collided.
Welcome back to the deep dive. And yeah, it's precisely this kind of listener-driven curiosity that fuels what we do here. You've handed us a really rich document, this analysis. It's meticulously laid the groundwork for understanding these two figures.
Definitely.
Well, our job now is to really explore the nuances and, the potential outcomes that this kind of detailed breakdown allows.
Absolutely. This isn't just about random fan theories. It's about taking a serious look under the hood of these characters based on the material you shared with us. So our aim today is sort of twofold. First, to truly grasp the core elements that define Christian Wolff and John Wick as, well, forces to be reckoned with.
Right.
And second, drawing from this analysis to really speculate on how a confrontation between them might actually play out.
And what's immediately striking from the analysis, I think, is this fundamental dichotomy. It highlights Wolff's lethality as something meticulously constructed, almost like an equation.
Yeah, calculated.
Exactly. Versus Wick's, which is far more fluid, adaptable, and really driven by instinct. It's this contrast that frames our whole exploration today, how these two different kinds of deadly operate.
Okay, so to really understand this contrast, let's dig into their origins first. Starting with Christian Wolff, the man behind the accountant.
Okay.
What the analysis brings to the forefront is how his early diagnosis of high-functioning autism wasn't just a biographical detail, it was like a foundational element that shaped his entire way of perceiving and interacting with the world.
And what's fascinating there is the almost opposing forces at play in his upbringing, isn't it? You had his mother seeking this supportive, almost cocoon-like environment to manage his sensory sensitivities.
Right, the softer approach.
While his father, a military man through and through, adopted this incredibly rigorous, almost brutal approach. That military background of the father, as the analysis points out, is absolutely key to understanding the man Wolff becomes.
Brutal is definitely the right word. Constant uprooting, intense training in pencak silat, which, for those unfamiliar, is a Southeast Asian martial art known for its devastating efficiency.
Very direct.
Coupled with marksmanship training, that's almost legendary, and this relentless push towards stoicism. And the analysis makes a point about the father's philosophy, not to shield Christian from sensory overload, but to force him to adapt to it. Talk about forging someone in the fire.
Exactly. This relentless training instilled in him this incredible capacity for control and detachment, precisely the kind of attributes that would later define his actions. And then you have the subsequent pivotal moments, his father's death and his time in Leavenworth. Each of these events, as the analysis suggests, served to further harden and refine him.
But it wasn't just about physical prowess, was it? The analysis really underscores his almost supernatural abilities with numbers, these savant-like skills directly linked to his autism.
Yeah, incredible processing power.
He could process and analyze vast oceans of data with incredible speed and accuracy, seeing patterns invisible to most of us. And then this twist of fate. His mentorship in prison by Francis Silverberg, a bookkeeper for the Gambino family, in the shadowy arts of black money accounting and forensic fraud detection.
Right, that connection is crucial.
It's this utterly unique and potent combination that makes him such a sought-after, albeit clandestine, asset for, well, criminal organizations.
And it's within this morally ambiguous underworld that Wolff develops this surprisingly rigid personal code. He's not just in it for the numbers. As the analysis points out, he often takes it upon himself to dispense his own form of justice. And when you factor in his secret dealings with Treasury agent Ray King and those philanthropic donations funneled through the voice, Justine, it paints a picture of a deeply complex individual operating entirely in the shadows.
Okay, a truly unique and intense origin story there. Now let's pivot to the legend that is John Wick, the Baba Yaga.
Yes.
The analysis starts by giving us his background. Born Jardani Jovanovic with Ruska Roma heritage, orphaned, and then taken in by Winston. There's also that intriguing mention of his time in Mexico. It feels like every piece of his past contributes to the Wick we know.
Absolutely. If we look at the broader narrative,
Mm-hmm.
Wick's early life is steeped in loss and a certain rootlessness, which you can argue laid the foundation for his later immersion in a world defined by violence and strict codes. Then comes his recruitment by the Ruska Roma in New York and that notoriously brutal training regimen under the director.
And the analysis really spells out just how intense that training was. A laundry list of lethal martial arts judo, multiple forms of jiu-jitsu, kali, krav maga, sambo, alongside expert firearms handling, tactical driving skills, infiltration, even escapology. It's not just about combat. It's about becoming a complete instrument of, well, not peace.
Yeah, exactly. What's really insightful here is how the analysis frames this training as a holistic development. It wasn't just about mastering individual skills, but about integrating them seamlessly, creating a kind of combat ecosystem within him.
Mm-hmm.
And following his time with the Ruska Roma, his ascent to the top enforcer for the Tarasov Russian crime syndicate really solidified his terrifying reputation.
Then the catalyst for his attempted escape from that life, his love for Helen.
Ah, Helen.
And to achieve that, he had to complete the infamous, impossible task for Viggo Tarasov. In doing so, he called in a favor from Santino d'Antonio, incurring a debt in that world that, as we all know, had severe consequences later on.
Huge consequences. And finally, the moniker, Baba Yaga. The analysis does a great job of clarifying that while it's often simplified to the boogeyman, its origins in Slavic folklore refer to a much more formidable figure, a powerful witch.
Right. Not quite the same thing.
No. This slight misinterpretation, the analysis argues, actually amplifies his mystique and the sheer terror he inspires within the assassin underworld. He's not just the guy you fear. He's the one you send to deal with the things that other boogeymen fear.
Okay, wow. So we have these two incredibly skilled individuals, each forged in very different fires. Let's get down to brass tacks and compare their actual abilities, starting with their combat prowess.
Let's do it.
For Wolff, the analysis emphasizes pencak silat as his primary martial art, highlighting its brutal efficiency and directness. He's also portrayed as this almost preternaturally accurate marksman, capable of those unbelievable long-range shots.
What really stands out with Wolff's fighting style, as the analysis points out, is its calculated nature. It's about rapidly neutralizing threats with precise, almost economical movements.
Very efficient.
Very. And while perhaps not as visually dynamic as Wick, his ability to weaponize everyday objects in his environment is consistently effective. Think of it as a highly optimized algorithm for combat.
Now, for Wick, it's all about gun fu, right?
Yeah.
This mesmerizing blend of martial arts, the Japanese and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, the judo throws, seamlessly integrated with tactical three-gun shooting.
Yeah, it's poetry in motion almost.
The analysis highlights those fluid transitions, his mastery of a wide array of firearms, that incredible speed and precision, even down to the now iconic double tap and the improvised weaponry. The analysis rightly calls it legendary. I mean, the pencil. Come on.
Absolutely. Wick's style is far more adaptive and reactive, excelling in dynamic, often chaotic, multi-opponent engagements. His marksmanship is geared more towards close to mid-range, focusing on speed and volume of accurate fire.
Different focus entirely.
And that almost instinctive ability to turn anything around him into a weapon is a crucial differentiator. Gun fu isn't just about looking cool with guns. It's about seamlessly blending firearm use with close-quarters martial arts, allowing for a constant flow of offense and defense, often in very tight spaces.
The analysis even gives us a fantastic comparative matrix, laying out their primary fighting styles, preferred weapons, marksmanship approaches, close-quarters abilities, improvised weapon usage, and defensive tactics side by side.
It's really useful.
It really crystallizes that core contrast. Wolff's preemptive targeted precision versus Wick's adaptive reactive ferocity.
And if we tie this back to their formative years, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Wolff's structured and regimented upbringing naturally leads to a structured and regimented fighting style, while Wick's more unpredictable and survival-driven path necessitates that incredible adaptability.
Moving on to how they think and strategize. For Wolff, the analysis posits that his intellect is his most potent weapon, particularly in the realms of forensic analysis and financial deception.
Definitely his biggest asset.
He's portrayed as a master of long-term planning, utilizing those aliases, always mathematicians, which is a brilliant detail, escape routes, and hidden assets like that infamous Airstream trailer. Even his seemingly legitimate CPA firm acts as this elaborate, ongoing strategic deception.
What's really insightful here is how Wolff's strategic thinking operates on a much broader, almost macro level, primarily within the complex world of finance. His combat engagements are often just very precise and necessary components of these larger, long-term schemes.
Yeah, a piece of a bigger puzzle. Now, when we look at Wick's strategic and tactical acumen, the analysis describes it as far more dynamic and focused on immediate adaptation. He's brilliant at exploiting his environment in real time, improvising tactics on the fly, and his infiltration and exfiltration skills are, well, legendary.
Absolutely.
And let's not forget his profound understanding of the assassin underworld, the intricate rules, the resources of the Continental, the weight of those markers. That's a whole strategic ecosystem he navigates expertly.
Yeah, and that marker system is key. A marker in Wick's world isn't just a favor, it's a blood oath, an unbreakable contract that demands repayment no matter the cost or the time elapsed. It represents the ultimate form of trust and obligation in this lethal society.
Wow, okay, so he knows how to work that system.
Exactly.
Huh.
Wick's planning is often about navigating the immediate chaos, leveraging the unique resources of the underworld, and making those critical moment-to-moment decisions in a rapidly evolving situation. It's short-term and reactive, but incredibly effective within his specific context.
Finally, let's delve into their physical capabilities and how they withstand punishment. This is always impressive.
Oh, yeah.
For Wolff, the analysis attributes his remarkable resilience to his father's intense desensitization training and perhaps even a different perception of pain due to his autism.
That's a really interesting angle.
They highlight his considerable strength, those single-strike incapacitations, the thermos skull fracture, and his ability to absorb significant damage. You see that in the movie, but hearing it described in this analytical way really underscores just how resilient he is. It's almost unbelievable.
And Wick, of course, is practically synonymous with relentless endurance and a staggering tolerance for pain. He just absorbs punishment that would incapacitate almost anyone and keeps pushing forward. His agility and reflexes are off the charts, and we can't forget his specialized, almost iconic, bulletproof suits.
Right, the suits help. The analysis draws a really interesting distinction here, though. Wolff's resilience seems rooted in this almost programmed conditioning and potentially a different processing of sensory input.
The neurodiversity aspect.
Whereas Wick's appears to stem from this incredible, almost indomitable will and the powerful emotional drivers we discussed earlier, augmented by his training and gear.
Two different paths to toughness. Now we move into the psychological landscapes of these two, and this is where we really start to appreciate the depth and complexity of these characters beyond just their fighting skills.
Yeah, it gets really interesting here.
For Christian Wolff, the analysis emphasizes that his autism isn't just a characteristic. It's a fundamental framework that shapes how he experiences and interacts with the world. His need for routine and order, his sensory sensitivities, that intense hyperfocus. It all plays a critical role.
And that hyperfocus, it's not just like paying attention.
No, not at all. That hyperfocus isn't just intense concentration. It allows Wolff to dissect complex combat scenarios or financial data with a level of detail and speed that most people can't even comprehend. He sees patterns and anomalies that others simply miss.
Okay, wow. And that profound need for order seems to extend into his very specific, almost idiosyncratic moral code, even within the criminal underworld. He's incredibly selective about who he works for, and he definitely has his own very clear sense of right and wrong, often dispensing his own brand of justice.
Exactly. The analysis points to his information sharing with Ray King and those quiet donations to Harbor Neuroscience as further evidence of this intricate internal compass.
So he's not just a mercenary.
No, definitely not. What's really key to understand here is that his seemingly detached emotional state might be more about an atypical way of expressing and processing emotions rather than a complete absence of them. His protective instincts towards figures like Justine and Dana, and that very poignant question he asks Ray King at the end of the film, hint at a much deeper capacity for empathy.
Shifting our focus to John Wick, the analysis identifies grief, the burning desire for revenge, the primal need for survival, and the enduring memory of Helen as the core driving forces behind his actions. It's this powerful emotional core that fuels so much of what he does.
Absolutely. And we see this stark duality in his psychological state. The almost robotic professional calm he exhibits as a highly efficient assassin versus the unleashed, almost terrifying rage that erupts when those deeply personal wounds are triggered.
Yeah, you don't want to trigger that.
No. But the analysis makes a crucial point. His violence, while extreme, is typically a means to a very specific end, not driven by any inherent sadism.
Right, it's functional in a way.
Precisely. And his relationship with the assassin underworld's intricate code is a fascinating study in itself. Initially, he adheres to it, even undertaking the seemingly impossible task to earn his freedom. But then, that pivotal moment, his blatant and brutal violation of the rules by killing Santino on continental grounds, which leads to his excommunicado status and fundamentally alters his entire existence.
Which brings us nicely to those crucial vulnerabilities, the chinks in their seemingly impenetrable armor.
Yeah, everyone has weak spots. For Christian Wolff, despite all that rigorous training, he remains susceptible to sensory overload. Those intense sensory inputs can still overwhelm him, potentially leading to a shutdown if he can't engage in his specific self-soothing rituals.
Like the Solomon Grundy rhyme, the music.
Exactly. And while his social awkwardness and those very strict routines are undoubtedly beneficial in certain contexts, the analysis astutely points out that they can also make him predictable and potentially exploitable if an adversary understands these patterns.
A double-edged sword.
Very much so. The analysis also highlights his critical reliance on the voice, Justine, for essential off-site technical, logistical, and communication support. This dependence creates a significant and potentially catastrophic operational vulnerability.
Right. If she's compromised, he's in trouble.
Big trouble. For John Wick, it's those deeply personal emotional triggers again. Anything that even remotely touches upon the memory of Helen can shatter his professional calm and lead to impulsive, even reckless decisions.
His greatest strength is also his weakness, in a way.
You could definitely argue that. And the consequences of his defiance of the underworld's rules are immense. That excommunicado status strips him of all protections and privileges, effectively painting a massive target on his back for the entire global assassin network.
Yeah, the whole world is after him. And despite his almost superhuman resilience, the sheer accumulated trauma of the countless severe injuries he sustained has to be taking a toll. Even he can't just absorb that level of punishment indefinitely without consequence.
No, eventually it catches up. The analysis provides another really useful side-by-side comparison, this time focusing on their key vulnerabilities. Their primary psychological triggers, social or interpersonal weaknesses, operational Achilles heels, and underlying physical limitations. It really underscores just how fundamentally different their points of weakness are.
Okay, and now for the question we've all been waiting for. In a hypothetical, no-holds-barred confrontation, who comes out on top?
The million-dollar question.
The analysis lays out some crucial scenario considerations, imagining a neutral, complex, urban environment unfamiliar to both, with the primary objective being the elimination of the other.
Right, no bystanders, just head-to-head.
It then breaks it down into two key scenarios. A sudden, unexpected encounter with no prep time, and a scenario with limited preparation, say 24 hours for planning, gathering gear, and basic reconnaissance.
Okay. In that first scenario, the sudden no-prep encounter, the analysis leans slightly towards John Wick. The reasoning here is his superior reactive skills and his proven ability to adapt instantly to chaotic and unpredictable situations.
Makes sense. Chaos is kind of his element.
Exactly. Wolff's more structured approach might be a disadvantage when thrown into the deep end without time to analyze and plan.
However, when you introduce that limited prep time, that 24-hour window, the analysis suggests the playing field levels out significantly, potentially even giving a slight advantage to Christian Wolff. His meticulous planning capabilities, his ability to analyze potential threats and strategize long-range engagements could really come into play there.
But overall, even with that caveat of prep time, the analysis ultimately gives a slight overall edge to John Wick. The rationale hinges on a few key factors. The sheer adaptability and versatility of his gun-fu style in close quarters.
Right.
His almost legendary resilience and unwavering willpower, his proven ability to sustain a relentless offensive in close quarters combat, and the potential, even if unintentional, to exploit Wolff's more rigid behavioral patterns and that reliance on off-site support.
That makes sense. Wick is just relentless pressure.
Relentless.
Yeah.
That said, the analysis also highlights Christian Wolff's potential paths to victory. These likely involve either a decisive long-range assassination, utilizing his exceptional marksmanship, or a very rapid and brutal takedown in a controlled close-quarters engagement before Wick's adaptability and resilience can truly take over.
So hit fast, hit hard, or hit from far away.
Pretty much. So, as we wrap up this detailed comparison, the analysis really paints a vivid picture of both the striking similarities and the fundamental differences in their lethal expertise. Both are undeniably at the apex of their respective worlds, but their journeys, their skills, their psychological makeup, and even their vulnerabilities are distinctly their own.
And in that way, they both occupy fascinating spaces on the anti-hero spectrum, don't they? Both operate in morally gray areas, but with their own unique and often surprising codes of conduct.
Definitely. You have Wolff, who targets criminals and secretly funds philanthropic endeavors, contrasted with Wick, who is driven by a deep personal sense of loss and reacts with extreme force to perceived wrongs.
Different motivations, different codes.
Very different. And finally, the analysis touches upon their enduring legacies within modern action cinema. Wolff has this really groundbreaking portrayal of a neurodivergent action hero.
Yeah, that was significant.
And Wick, for single-handedly popularizing that gun fu style and ushering in this era of highly stylized and visceral action filmmaking, it underscores that there's a real complexity to these characters that extends far beyond just their capacity for violence, ensuring their lasting impact on how we tell these kinds of stories.
So to bring it all together, what we've seen in this deep dive is a fascinating study in contrasts. Wolff's meticulously structured precision against Wick's incredibly adaptive deadliness. While a direct confrontation leans slightly in Wick's favor, Wolff's strategic brilliance and long-range capabilities certainly make him a formidable threat.
Definitely not a clear-cut answer.
Sad.
And here's something for you, the listener, to really consider. Moving beyond the obvious head-to-head fight, how might their unique skill sets and those deeply ingrained moral codes lead them to interact or clash in other, perhaps more indirect scenarios?
Interesting.
Could Wolff's unparalleled financial skills somehow be leveraged against the very underworld in which Wick operates? Or might Wick's almost unbreakable tenacity be something that Wolff, in his analytical way, could actually recognize and perhaps even admire?
That's a great thought. We'd love to hear what you think. Based on this deep dive, what are your own theories and potential outcomes? Feel free to revisit the films and the detailed analysis we've discussed today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for providing such compelling source material and for joining us on this deep dive into these two fascinating characters.
Until our next deep dive, take care.